Sometimes the world has a load of questions. Seems like the world knows nothing at all. And that is why so many people demand a Snorlax ban in GSC. So I've made a video previously called Why Snorlax Isn't Banned in GSC or something like that, which you can check out if you would like a logistical example of why it will not be done. But today we are going to explore what a theoretical Laxless GSC OU would look like at the very beginning anyway. Because part of the reason, or the main reason why we can't ban Lax in GSC is that it would completely overhaul the tier and more bans would surely be needed. And GSC does not have the player base to cope with such massive swinging changes. So if for some reason GSC suddenly got a huge super active player base and was like, yeah, you know what, let's finally do it. Let's ban Lax and then ban Zapdos because, spoiler, that does happen. And we want to go down that rabbit hole? Sure. Personally, I think it would probably stop after Zapdos, but I also don't know that the effect would be good in terms of, like, people will often say, oh, well, Snorlax is so broken, and it's, you have to have it on every team. Well, putting aside my idea that Zapdos should be on every team, it's just without Snorlax, that same, mandatory Pokemon on every team factor doesn't really go away. It just shifts to another Pokemon. So, let's say that we have canned Snorlax. Okay. If that happens, then Zapdos has to go. Zapdos is already insanely obnoxious to the point of some people going, dude, this is better than Snorlax, as good as Snorlax. I mentioned, I think it's as mandatory as Snorlax. I understand that that's just my personal hot take that a lot of people just aren't ready for, / disagree with for some reasons which are valid, other reasons which are not valid. If you want to take a life lesson out of this video, it is that not all opinions are valid just because they're opinions. That is not a defense for something being, for something lacking grounding in reason or experience or any of that. Not that one necessarily needs a certain level of experience to have a valid opinion, of course, should it be reasonably well thought out, but that's not generally what we're talking about. Anyway, so Zapdos is already overbearing with Snorlax around, and without Snorlax it just becomes unbearable. I mean, talk about mandatory. And you want to talk about mandatory, it's not just Zapdos, it's going to be Raichu too, because think about the Pokemon used to answer Zapdos. Every team does okay against Zapdos by default because of Snorlax. Snorlax already struggles, so you generally try to help it out. On stall teams, you obviously need Raikou or Blissey. And on offensive teams, you will generally need Raikou and or a ground type, more commonly a ground type. So also think about the fact that ground types are horrendous into Zapdos. Zapdos tends to switch into ground types more than the other way around, because obviously it has that nice immunity to Earthquake and Spikes, and the super effective coverage moves, who cares? I mean, they bounce off. Zapdos threatens them so much more quickly, and yeah, grounds on their own are not sufficient Zapdos answers. If you're going to run a team similar to what gets used in GSC today, just minus Snorlax plus, I'll use, Machamp and Vaporeon on my offense team, then you are going to get absolutely eviscerated by Zapdos, because a ground alone isn't enough. So if a ground alone isn't enough, what do? Well, Raikou. So now every team has Zapdos and Raikou, because just because Raikou is going to be used on every team doesn't stop Zapdos from being insanely good. I mean, the dual electric attack is already pretty flawless with Lax around. Without Lax, so people often bemoan GSC as being a stall metagame, but I promise, the second you remove Snorlax from GSC, you make it infinitely stallier, because you remove one of the most powerful offensive weapons. And because of this dearth of effective answers to Zapdos, and Raikou for that matter. I mean, the grounds are better into Raikou, but it's still faster, hitting them harder, KOing them, or wearing them down very quickly. Then you will really have little choice but to stall. If you can't out-offense the electrics, and no, you cannot, then you will just have to go on the defensive against them. GSC does not have enough offense and defense to pivot in and out-offense the electrics consistently. Mostly Zapdos, which is why Zapdos really has to go. And I think the buck might stop at Raikou, and Raikou becomes the new Snorlax, the new mandatory poke. Yeah, but seeing as Raikou is more countered by ground types, it's not going to be as mandatory to use it to counter itself. It would be more mandatory as in what could you possibly be running that's going to pose more of a threat. But yeah, you would have to stall. You would have to go all Blissey. And it does actually raise an interesting question of if Celebi would be unbanned in a laxless GSC. Because, I mean, people already talk about dropping Celebi and Ho-Oh for that matter into OU now, with Snorlax around. Because Lax is already, unquestionably better than them. So it's more... when, in the earliest days of competitive Pokemon, the Ubers list was ideally as short as possible. So, the Mewtwo's and Mews of the world, and Celebi is like another one of those. And then Lugia, Ho-Oh, that's the Uber list. It's not based on the tiering practices of the modern day, decade and a half at this point. But, it's the same reason why Celebi was banned for a time in advance. And that was also because it had been banned in GSC and it was annoying with Leech Seed, but that's not the point. The point is that you could make an argument, hey, we want a better answer to the electrics, so rather than ban Zapdos, let's unban Celebi. Which, I mean, hey, that's pretty valid. Drill Peg Zapdos stocks go up, so that's cool. But I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of ideas flying around my head, like that Hidden Power is such a stupid move because the electrics being able to breeze past the ground so easily just is so silly. And I've made a video, maybe two, about why I don't like Hidden Power as a move. But it's generally pretty okay with balance in the first couple gens, but there's a reason why Hidden Power on Zapdos and Raikou was banned for a long time in GSC. Talk about a complex ban. People didn't mind that one. It was justified as, we don't want to... It's too hard to get in-game. Come on, who cares? We're not banning Wish Blissey in advance. Yeah. So, you could theoretically... after you ban Lax, then you avoid further bans by dropping down Celebi, which kind of counters everything. The problem is, though, if you're okay with GSC truly being a stall fest, then okay. But a lot of the people who clamor to ban Lax are also the people who, I'm sorry, but it generally tends to be an opinion rooted in very little practical knowledge of the tier. It's just, Lax is broken, therefore get rid of it. There's no excuse for GSC to blah, blah, blah. And these people tend to also be saying, stall is also all GSC is, it's too slow, da, da, da. Now, just because one of those opinions is silly, the stall one, doesn't automatically invalidate the other one, of course. I just find it funny that those are the people who are most prominently in support of a Snorlax ban. Yeah, but I'm really trying to organize my thoughts so I don't go in 16 different directions simultaneously. It's a challenge because there's just so much to go over. But, yeah. So, the idea is that Snorlax plus 5 generally will create more diversity than ban Lax and, seeing what happens then. Unless you want to follow it with more bans. But, I mean, look, if you're banning Snorlax and then expecting more bans to happen afterwards, you have a very, very optimistically, naive would probably be the more accurate word, view of how such an ancient generation can just be completely flipped on its head. Because your options after banning Lax are, ban Zapdos or run full stall constantly, because that's the only way you're not going to get crushed by Zapdos and Raichu, but mostly Zapdos for the most part. Or you unban Celebi, which, I mean, yes, it's an unban as opposed to a ban, so less drastic generally, but still drastic and still a significant change. I'm not so sure you would be able to swing on a lot of people. So, yeah, the metagame post Snorlax it does become a true GSC stereotype. You know, like we already mentioned, there just aren't answers to the electrics. That's the biggest one. I mean, other things like Nidoking, yeah, okay, Nidoking would be annoying, but the electrics, tower over Nidoking, especially because Nidoking is a ground type that fails to really answer the electrics. I mean, it's decent into Raikou, but it's not great. It's best when it's running Morning Sun, but that's not really a move you want to be throwing on Nidoking non-stop. It's got a lot of moves to cram into 4 slots as it is. So, yeah, the Laxless GSC is going to see so much. And before you think this is pure theory, Mon, there have been Laxless tournaments hosted in the past. There was a pretty high-profile one in 2013. I know there were a couple in the Net Battle days, but the one in 2013 was played seriously, and it pretty much confirmed what had been done in the Net Battle era. Now, that's a long time ago. I will admit that. If someone wants to host a Laxless GSC tournament and get a bunch of good players to play it and motivate them to try, because that last Laxless GSC tournament was held when unofficial tournaments were something people still cared about, and now you gotta entice them with cash prizes or because it's not going to get a trophy on Smogon because it's unofficial. It's an alternate format. The format that doesn't truly exist in line with the other metagames that we have, the standards. So, sorry, I just got a distracting text. Yeah. So if someone wants to do that, I would be all for it. So maybe, we do find a more offensive metagame nowadays, because this was pre-Jinx and everything. But more offensive does not also mean more balanced. It could be stall is safe and offense becomes risky to run, and because there's no stability. Because in offense-on-offense games, Lax provides that stability. So, yeah, I'm not so sure people would be super jazzed about that one. Because right now, one of the great things to be enthused about in GSC is that offense is really, really good. And yeah, GSC is a beacon of balance competitively, but sometimes it does get frustrating with, how irritating offense can be, and you feel like you got to run Rest Hawk Snorlax non-stop to have stability. But yeah, that's a more detailed issue to have. So I don't know. It just feels very idealistic, the idea of Laxless GSC. But even once you get past the idealism and say, okay, well, what if it actually happens? It's not. I mean, we know what it's looked like in the past when people tried it. And nowadays, sure, we'd have more Jinxes, we'd have more Espeons, we'd have more Alakazams, trying to find novel ways to break past the electrics and break past them, threaten them, not be instantly threatened by them. Sure, there would be, that would help. But, I don't know, like, maybe it is possible, but I don't see it happening realistically. And I don't see the metagame being better off for it either, which is the... Now, I mean... I'll stop myself from repeating myself because that is a bad habit of mine. But I think I've said more or less everything I want to regarding this. Yeah, if you want to have a lot of Raikou wars, Raikou wars are an occupational hazard of GSC sometimes anyway. But if you want to guarantee them, then you get rid of Lax. I mean... Even post Zapdos, look, I think it would be palatable. And matter of fact, it kind of intrigues me, the Laxless, Zapless metagame. I think that'd be cool to have Raikou as the top dog, because Raikou is much more flawed as a top dog top cat, am I right? But it's much more flawed in this sense because it has much more exploitable weaknesses. You know, Zapdos is not as titanically bulky as Lax, of course, but it also is immune to spikes, immune to earthquake, as an electric type. You know, that's kind of a big deal. So with Raikou, you're worn down by spikes, you're weak to earthquake, it's not as strong, so it makes a big difference, and I think it would be on the manageable side for sure. So, yeah, it does intrigue me, and I think in this metagame, a lot of the dances are going to be Raikou plus grounds, because you don't want to just wall Raikou forever, you want to actually threaten it. So, again, you're going to have spikes as always, there's no reason not to, once again. That is already a truism of current GSC, I believe. I don't really buy those Quagsire, but I made a video on that already. Those Quagsire spikeless teams. Anyway, so what I really how would I phrase this? I think it would be Raikou, Spiker, so Cloyster, Ground. It is nice that it opens up not needing a normal resistant phaser on every team to deal with Curse-Lax and Sleep Talk Curse-Lax in particular. That's why you need a normal type phaser, or Gengar plus Zapdos, but that's for very specific teams. I think I go over that in detail in my Thief in GSC video. But yes, so you'll see more varied offense, but you are going to have stall wars of Raikou on Raikou a lot, simply because there's no other way of handling, the Raikou threat a lot of the time. Even if you do have the ground type, it's not always going to be safe to switch it in. I mean, look at something like GSC UU, where, yes, there are plenty of Pokemon that threaten the Slow Twins and Hypno, for example, but they don't actually want to switch into it. That's the big thing. Also, it is mostly just ground types, I have to stress, that really threaten Raikou. Other than that, it's like Earthquake T-Tar, Earthquake Machamp, and those don't like switching into Thunder. But yeah, the GSCU example is very pertinent here, I think, because you'll have, Scyther or whatever that threatens the Psychics, but do you actually want to switch it in? No. So even though you have these Pokemon that actually threaten the Psychics, switching them in is a big no-no, so you are forced to go into a stall war with your own bulky Psychic. Slow Twin Wars, Hypno Wars, Rest Talking, Stalemate. It's, I think GSCU is a great tier for the record, but be prepared for that dynamic. Now, if you ban Raikou too, I don't think that you would need to ban it, though, because it's not going to be broken. It's just going to be, the aforementioned dynamic of Raikou stalling each other. I personally have no issue with that, but the people who are tired of Lax being broken, I have a hard time imagining them being okay with forced Raikou wars, all the time. Because not running Raikou, I don't... why? Your opponent thanks you for not running one and being worse off into your Raikou. I mean, cool, you can run like a Blissey stall team or something, but you're a lot less threatening. I would almost want to run Raikou and Blissey, but yeah. So that's basically it from me. Thank you so much for watching or listening, but I hope you enjoyed either way, and I will see you in the next one.